I'd like to welcome everyone once again to the CPO Arena. I'm your host and moderator, Jon Hansen. And in this second episode, we're very excited to welcome a supplier of which I'm certainly interested in knowing more about, Real Sourcing Network, or RSN. Now, before we get to today's show, I want to give you a little bit of an overview of what we're going to be doing. For the first 5 minutes, the provider is going to give a background story, who they are, a sort of introduction, if you will. Then for 7 to 8 minutes, they'll do a demonstration of what they feel is one of the unique features or functions of their solution. From there, we'll move to the panel, and there'll be a 10-minute period of where there'll be questions and answers, where they'll be able to ask the provider for clarification. And then finally, in the last 5 minutes, they'll close off with their assessment. Now, one thing I want to remind everybody is that shortly after this is broadcast live out there in the world, so to speak, we'll be preparing, as before, a synopsis of the solution, and each of our esteemed panelists' view and perspective on what the solution brings to the table. And without further delay, let's right now just very quickly turn to our panelists and ask them to share with us a little bit about themselves. And I'll start with Kanda Rozier. Kanda, great to have you here.
Thanks, John. It's great to be back on the show. I'm a former chief procurement officer and corporate real estate executive with several global companies. Now the president of Collabra Consulting, which is focused on procurement transformation, strategic sourcing, and I'm really looking forward to today's show.
Well, thank you, Candy. And if I could remind you just to turn off your camera for the first part, we'll be back to you during the Q&A session. Joe Yakura, how are you, sir? It's good to have you back.
Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Glad to be here. I'm Joe Yakura, former Chief Procurement Officer for American Express, Pacific Bell, Intercontinental Hotels Company, Bank of America, and most recently Fannie Mae. And I recently created an organization called the International Association for Data Quality, Governance, and Analytics in the Supply Chain Space. So it's an honor to be here again for the second show, and I'm looking forward to hearing about RSN.
Well, great. And we are certainly glad to have you. Again, a reminder just to turn off your camera. And now we move to Cheryl Hayes. How are you, Cheryl?
I'm good, John. How are you? And thank you for having me. I'm delighted to be here and be with my esteemed colleagues. So I'm currently the Director of Procurement at Stryker. So we're right in the thick of things. I have about a 20+ year career in supply chain with EMC and Siemens and others. So looking forward to hearing the presentation. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. And if you could just click off your camera, you already know that. I don't even have to say that anymore. Hervé Legendre, again, great. You're joining us from overseas. You know, you're giving us a whole global international flavor here, which we appreciate. Share a little bit about yourself and your organization, because I think it's a very interesting story there.
Yeah, my name is Hervé. I'm a professor at the EIPM, European Institute of Purchasing Management, and my background is really in innovation, and really happy to be with you today.
Well, it's great to have you as well, Hervé. And reminders, turn off your camera as we go to this part of the segment. Last but not least, and I always say that, and I must say, and we have commented on the hat. I love the hat. I want to know where I can get one, because I'll wear it the next show. Michael Cadieux, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and in particular Procurement Foundry, because that's really an industry game-changing, I guess you call community.
Yeah, my name is Mike Cadieux. I'm also a former chief procurement officer for about 20 years with one of the largest advertising companies in the world. A couple of years ago, I started a community for procurement practitioners called Procurement Foundry. And now we've got almost 4,000 members in 110 countries with real-time collaboration for free. So it's a great thing.
Great stuff. Well, again, always looking forward to having your feedback here as well, Michael, and just click off your camera if you could. And let's turn to our service provider guests that we're welcoming, Sarah Scudder and Sandy Kane. What I'll do is I'll turn over the floor to you. Perhaps you give a little bit of background on yourself and then get into your organization as well.
Thanks so much, John. I'm Sandy Kane, the founder and CEO of RSN. From a background standpoint, I spent 27 years working at IBM, with my last assignment running their worldwide semiconductor operations. Since leaving IBM, I've been the CEO of 8 different companies. And the idea of starting a print procurement software company was born out of a lot of the experiences I had in many of those past endeavors. Sarah and I have met about 3 years ago and jointly honed the idea of what is now RSN. Sarah, why don't you spend a minute and tell them about your background?
So I started my career in marketing, and through a company acquisition transitioned into marketing procurement. And that role, I helped several global companies set up very strategic, more technology-driven solutions for better sourcing print and marketing services. And in that role, I identified a lot of manual work being done with email and spreadsheets and significant inefficiencies, which is how I came to the realization that there was a need in the market for a very niche sourcing tool specifically designed for sourcing print.
Thanks, Sarah. We hear a lot of people say, you know, why should I focus on the idea about print? There's no future in it, it's dead, etc. And we're here to tell you that the reverse of that is actually the truth. If you look at the last couple of years, you can see both worldwide and in the US, there's actually been a slight growth in annual print spend. And we don't obviously have numbers for 2020 yet, but I'm guessing that because of the pandemic and the force that has been made of marketing spending being so different, there might actually be an increase in 2020 as well.
It's important to note that print includes much more than ink on paper. We've listed on this slide some of the major different types of print. The 3 fastest growing segments in the print space are packaging, labels, and direct mail. Packaging and labels because more and more consumers are making purchases online, and direct mail because more and more of us are working from home. So many companies just completely ignore their print spend altogether. And they do that for 2 major reasons. The first is that marketing is afraid that any deviation from what they're doing today is going to impact the quality and turnaround time of their materials. The second is the lack of data. Many companies have no idea how much they actually spend on print, which makes them think they're spending a lot less than they actually are. One of the other trends that we see is a lot of companies will single source their print, meaning they're buying from just 1 or 2 print suppliers. This has 2 major downsides. The first is that the company is not able to take advantage of significant cost savings. Our clients see an average savings of 14 to 22% a year by doing consistent competitive bidding. The second is it stifles innovation. Printing equipment is really expensive. And if you're just working with 1 or 2 suppliers, you're limiting your access to the newest technology and newest equipment.
The heart of our business is a proprietary print procurement management software system that improves productivity, drives costs down, all done while maintaining or even improving quality and service. With this tool, we offer our clients 2 very distinct solutions. For those clients that have a team in place that is focused on print procurement, we offer a self-service solution where their team uses our software to drive an automated competitive bidding process. Alternatively, we have clients who will then outsource their print procurement requirements to us so that we have our experts leverage the capabilities of that same software to ensure that our clients get all of the benefits that we can provide. If you look at the bottom of the slide, you can see a small sample of the wide range of our client base.
One of the things that we pride ourselves in at RSN is having really, really simple, easy to use solutions. Our self-service solution implements within 3 to 5 business days, and our managed print services solution implements instantaneously. A great example of this is Wolverine Worldwide. They sent us a contract on Tuesday, and by Friday of the very same week, their self-service solution was fully up and running. Bob, who runs their print procurement team, sent us a note saying it was the easiest, most seamless implementation he's ever been a part of. About a month later, one of their 18 print suppliers that they had us set up in their platform sent us an email that thanked us for building our software and partnering with Wolverine Worldwide. And they noted how much time our tool saves them because they no longer have to respond to massive amounts of emails and input data into spreadsheets.
Some of the key benefits of our solution I'll describe here. One, of course, is that the software drives an automated competitive bidding process, guaranteeing clients significant savings by leveraging our open press capacity. The system also eliminates, as Sarah mentioned, the use of emails and spreadsheets so that all communications are maintained within the system, as well as all job specifications and artwork are stored in the system and easily recovered. We're frequently asked, why should we use your system if we're already using SAP or Ariba or any other ERP system? Well, the requirements for managing print are typically very specific and detailed, and there isn't any capability to handle that in a standard ERP system. And you'll be able to clearly see what I mean by that when you look at the demo. That's a quick story, John.
I guess, as they say, you know, the old, what was it, Mark Twain, who said, reports of my death were greatly exaggerated. That's one of the things that first came to my mind about the death of Prince. So looking forward to seeing the demo.
Great.
All right, our software is called SourceIt, and it was specifically designed for sourcing print. It is hosted on Microsoft Azure, and that's important to note because they have extremely high security standards, which help ensure that we maintain security with all of our clients' data and information. Our tool has 5 major functions. The first is allows the buyer to access really clean and good information in this reporting section, so they can make really good buying decisions based on having accurate and clean information. The second function in our tool is it has project management built in. When you are sourcing print, there's many nuances involved with a print job, and there's lots of back and forth and manual work being done. Our tool automates all of that and has the milestones clearly noted with deliverables, so anyone associated with the print job can log in and track the milestones here online. The third is supplier management. You can upload all of your supporting documents for the print suppliers that you choose to set up in the tool. You can upload things like a master service agreement, an NDA, if you have a women-owned certification, or any certifications around sustainability. Here in this section, you can also set expiration dates so the buyer and the supplier is aware when something is coming up for renewal. The fourth function in our tool is having a catalog feature. So once something is competitively bid, and if it's set up on a contract, we can then put it in a catalog so end users can log in and quickly order the day-to-day print items that they need. The fifth function in our tool, which is what we're going to spend our time on today, which is what makes our tool very, very unique and is different than anything available in the marketplace, is our Rfq Driven Sourcing function. This allows a buyer to come in and generate an RFQ, which is template driven, for a one-off print job, which happens quite a bit, or a print job that is going to be set up on a contract. And that would be something where you know you're going to order, let's say 12 million postcards over a 6-month period of time. And instead of bidding every single time you need postcards, you're going to put that on a contract. Once a buyer logs into the market module, she's going to go here into a catalog. And this shows all the different types of print that can be ordered. In this case, she has selected a brochure. Next, she's going to put in how many quantities she wants priced. Here we have 1,000, 25,000, and 50,000. Our system will default the production method for the buyer based on the type of product and the quantity. Support materials, if there's any charts, graphs, diagrams, anything else that the buyer wants the suppliers to look at, she'll attach here. Project details, if this contains multiple items, this is where she's going to note that. And if there's multiple people involved, which there often is when you're sourcing print, because you may have contract designers, agency, people who are managing your media that need to be included. Next, the buyer is going to provide all of her milestones. Highlights here are when does she needs the bids back? If she needs a physical proof, when does she need that? And then when does the job need to be delivered? We've built in the functionality for an end user to be able to limit their bids by state. So you can actually say, if you are running a job that's going to be for an event in Georgia and you have a super quick turn, you may only want to bid your jobs in Georgia. Our tool is global. We have users in multiple countries. So you can also limit bids by province if you're in Canada, or by region, depending on which country you're in. We also have built in the ability to track and manage supplier classifications. Being able to promote sustainability and diversity spend is important to both Sandy and I and our entire team at RSN. And we want to help our clients better manage those spends and make that easier for them to partake in as well. So we've built in all the specific unique certifications that are around diversity and sustainability that relate to print. Diversity, we've got veteran, union, indigenous, women, minority, and then the ones that are labeled environmental. These are specific to sustainability. We've got also color and quality management certifications. This is configurable by client. So if somebody has additional classifications that they want to track or things that they're not going to use, we will configure this on a client by client basis. Step 2 of my 5-step RFQ process is I'm going to name my project. I'm going to select my product category. That's important for reporting and tracking purposes. I'm going to put in my item ID or item number. And then if I'm tracking versions, which is often done in print, I'm going to note that here. This is what is so unique about our tool. We've got over 110 templates built into the backend. Based on the type of print job that the buyer selects, the right template appears. This has all of the industry knowledge and backend built into it, so it asks the right questions based on the type of print item. Then we've got a series of drop-downs and checkboxes. This has all of the industry knowledge built in. In the case of this, these are all the industry standard brochure sizes, making it really simple and easy for somebody to come in and build out their specs for this job. We also have the ability to create and store templates. If you select a template, this entire step 2 will automatically appear based on the specs that you have entered in the tool, making it even faster and easier to run a bid. Direct mail can be a big spend for companies. That involves postage. So here we have the ability for the end user to select which type of postage. And then we have a catch-all box. Any other notes or details that the buyer maybe wants to include will be noted here. Step 3 is shipping and packaging. The buyer is going to note unit of measure and how she wants the shipping to be handled. We have the ability for a client to provide their own freight account, so all jobs can ship on their own account, so they can have complete transparency and better manage their print spend if they choose to do so. Step 4 is the bid matching process. We have technology built into our tool that matches the specs of the job with the in-house production capabilities of the suppliers that are set up for this specific client. We feel 5 is the optimal number in the print space to drive the most significant cost savings. So here, our tool has found the 5 best print suppliers for this specific brochure project. Now the buyer can modify this, and she might decide that she only wants 2 bids, 3 bids, 4 bids. If more matches had appeared here, maybe there was 3 or 4 other suppliers, she could also say that she wants more than 5 bids. We provide complete transparency so they can see who the supplier is, some of their basic contact information. On the right-hand side, we have a health score. This tracks supplier performance. We track 4 KPIs that make up this health score, so the buyer and supplier can always see how they're performing against those 4 KPIs. This is a demo site. These are dummy suppliers, so these health scores are lower than they should be because they're not actually responding to bids, so they're getting dinged in the system. On the far right, if these were diverse or sustainable, those certifications would be noted here if that's something that you're really focused on to track and maintain. The final step in our RFQ process is the bid screen. We've now sent out an email notification to those 5 suppliers. They are now get an email, they log into the tool, and they're going to price the job directly in the tool. No more email, no more spreadsheets. When all of the bids come back, the buyer gets an email notification. She will log into the tool, and this is the bid screen that she is going to see. It will note the date the supplier accepted, the date the supplier responded, and the supplier's pricing. It also shows the supplier health score, so the buyer can see how the supplier is performing. And then if they're diverse or sustainable, that will be noted in 2 extra columns. Our tool highlights the lowest cost option for each quantity, so the buyer can clearly identify the best cost option for each of the 3 different quantities that she's recommended. She can then select a box, which will then have our tool generate a purchase order and start the proofing process. We also are very, very used to doing integrations with many third-party systems. We do so through an open API. So if that is what has been set up, our system will then push the data to that system to then generate a purchase order. I do want to note that there are 3 ways suppliers are set up and managed in our tool. The first is some companies have their own preset print supplier base, and they only want to use those suppliers. We will onboard those suppliers, and then the bidding will only take place amongst that supplier base. Other clients that we work with don't have a pre-established print supplier base. In that case, we have a built-in supplier base of 100 suppliers in the US, 24 in Canada, and several hundred in Australia. The third is a combination, and that's the most likely. Oftentimes, a company will be single sourcing. They'll have 1 or 2 print suppliers. They'll also then leverage our supplier base to really drive efficiency and cost savings. So with that, John, I'll turn it back over to you.
You can breathe now, Sarah.
Thank you so much. Sandy and Sarah, a very precise and informative session. I'd like to invite our panel to turn their cameras back on for the Q&A period. And I'll start off with, let's start off with you, Hervé. Any questions specifically from what you've seen today?
Well, I was going to ask about, any need for a print in Malaysia, for instance, but I guess I understood this was for specific countries. But let's say, I'm operating in specific regions and I worked with local print companies that are next door. How is it for me as a local marketing manager to ensure this local supplier is integrated into the list? And I had a second question, which was about, could you get different price depending on delivery date?
Let's take those questions one at a time. With regard to the suppliers, if any client has 1 or 2 or 10 or more clients, suppliers that they would like us to include in our network, we can easily implement that by getting the information we need from the supplier and put them in the network. There is no cost to the supplier to join our network at the beginning or any time going forward. So we don't very often get a supplier to say, no, I don't want to participate, because they're going to lose business. In addition, by joining the network, they have access to being able to bid on our other clients' work as well. The client can choose to have us only put in the system their suppliers and ignore the network that we already have. Totally a choice of the client going forward on that basis. So it's relatively easy to implement them in that. The answer to your second question is, usually if there's a rush that you need on a job to get done, you're going to pay extra either because they're going to have to work overtime to get the job done or ship it to you at a higher cost. So it's not unusual to have a higher price if you want something done yesterday.
And Irv, I'll also note that our tool is global. We have users in 7 countries. We have all the currency and metrics options built in. So no matter where somebody's based around the globe, they could use our tool. Our vetted and built out supplier base that we provide is currently Australia, US, and Canada.
Perfect. All right, Hervé, was that the answers you were looking for?
Yes, it is. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
All right. If I could, Hervé, so we can fit people on the screen, have you turn off your camera again. I'm going to go to Cheryl. And Cheryl, questions, please.
Sure. And I know I always love listening to Sarah. She's the most energetic, positive person. So thank you for that on an early morning. First of all, I was very unaware that there's almost $1 trillion of spend in print, right? And it was interesting to me as well that only about 1/4 of that, though, is in the US. Not sure why. So I'd love to hear the answer to that. But it's a great tool and very interesting, obviously. And obviously, when I think of print, I think of law offices or banks that continue to need that type of service. And a couple of questions. Do you have some type of managed services that you offer in this space? And also, how do you, obviously coming from technology and large companies, how do you manage the security of that information that's funneling through your portal?
Sarah, you want to deal with that?
Yeah, so I'll answer the security question first. So we've got 4 things put in place to ensure that we have really secure transactions of data for our clients. The first is that we host on Microsoft Azure. The second is our data is encrypted during the entire transit process. The third is all users and suppliers have access that is password protected. And we provide complete audibility from every step of the interaction within the tool. First part of your question was around the managed service solution. Absolutely. We provide a managed service solution. Some people call it a buying desk. And that's typically for organizations that spend less than $1 million a year. If you're spending $100,000, $250,000 a year, implementing our tool is not going to make sense for you. But people have a buyer that is maybe managing 10 or 15 categories and isn't necessarily has the time to dedicate to print as much as they should. So by leveraging our managed service solution, we will run the bidding and buying and manage that process on behalf of the client.
Let me just add a little bit to that. On top of Sarah's comment about, unless you're spending $1 million a year or more, the managed services idea makes more sense. In terms of putting together an ROI to justify doing this, the need to have a large print spend is what's going to justify the license fee to license our software. And if you don't spend enough money, even though you're going to save money on everything you spend, it's not going to be enough to cover the cost of the license. On the other hand, on the managed service, you can justify doing this if you're spending $100,000 on print, because the savings is instant. And if we're going to save you 20% of $100,000 is still $20,000 that you could save. And so it's an easy ROI to do on that basis. One of the other things that's also important to talk about is the fact that, as Sarah mentioned, and I think I did as well, the typical client saves anywhere between 15 and 22% on our tool. What we find is that clients who are not currently doing competitive bidding on their print, which is most clients, the savings is typically 30 to 40% instead of 15 to 20%.
Okay, wow, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Cheryl. Great questions, by the way. Let's turn to Joe Yakura. Joe, questions for either Sarah or Sandy or both?
Yeah, I was very impressed with the tool. It looks like obviously there's a lot of thought went into the design and the data that you capture on the front end. And also it looks like the user interface and navigation is well thought out and very simple to use, which is great for any tool. Obviously, user interfaces are critical. Question I have is can you provide, given you capture all this data, a should cost for some company before you have to go out and exercise suppliers? If I want to do a print project, can I use your tool, given you collect all this data, and provide, here's a should cost, so I can go back and get a budget or whatever I need to do before I actually go out to the marketplace?
The quick answer is yes. I mean, if you go into the tool and exercise the process to get a quote, it doesn't mean that you automatically have to exercise it and turn it into a job that you're actually going to produce. So you can get a quote, it'll get saved until you want to use it, or modified, for any change you want, but it's in the system and you can have access to it on that basis. So
Well, I'm talking beyond, my question is not to structure the RFQ, but could I actually get a should cost for a project I put in there without actually having to exercise the suppliers? That's my question.
So the answer is we have the ability to set up what we call a rate card program, which is kind of what we call as a should cost. And so it can have market pricing listed. So you can get a gauge of, okay, how much should this direct mail program cost? How much should this postcard cost me?
Okay, great. And one other question before I go. Your licensing agreements, are they multi-year initially, single year? How do you structure that with your customers?
It's typically a 3-year renewable license.
Okay.
And we ask clients to pay us for the year at the beginning of the year.
Great. Well, thank you. Those are all my questions.
One of the other things that I think is important to note about that is we are really big on doing pilots, so people can test out our tool and program to make sure it's a good fit. So before going into a 3-year contract, we'll often do a 3-month, a 6-month, or even we'll run a couple bids just to make sure that it's a win and they're really going to gain, the benefit that they should from the program.
Great. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you, Joe.
Pleasure.
Appreciate it. Questions?
Hi, thanks, John, and Sarah and Sandy. It was thanks for the demo. I agree absolutely with Joe's comment about the usability and the user interface. The question I've got is in the presentation you mentioned you touched on if I have an ERP, why would I still use this? And clearly there's functionality that is very specific to marketing print kind of spend. The question I've got is, other than the integration with an ERP to handle, for example, the push of the PO, is there further integration so that the history of the bid can somehow be attached from a supplier spend analytics perspective? And also, do you integrate with other networks such as the Ariba network for suppliers?
Sarah?
Yeah, so in regards to Ariba, yes, we've done more integrations with SAP Ariba type systems than anything else. So absolutely. And then first part of your question, remind me, what was the first part of the question?
It is, to what degree do you, excuse me, integrate data other than the push to PO?
Yeah, so it just depends on a client by client basis. Our system allows for a push-pull integration, so we can bring information in and we can push information out. Some people only want to integrate at the point where when they select the bid, it then pushes for the PO. Some people want more of an integration. We do all of that through a RESTful open API.
Okay, thanks. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Kanda. And of course, I always say this last but not least, Michael, questions? Oh, I think you have to unmute there, Michael.
I am very sorry about that. You'd think I'd be doing this well enough. So first, thanks for the demo, Sarah and Sandy. Really interesting information. Obviously, you addressed the 800-pound gorilla in the room right away, which is why I care about print at all, right? Most people think that print is dead, and when you throw up those staggering numbers, it's pretty obvious why you should care about it. So I had a couple of questions, but actually you answered them. I wanted to know a little bit about your POC and onboarding process, and do you offer, a dip the toe in the water strategy before, or a proof of concept to show people that you're saving money? But I also had a question around the $1 million thing. I did some quick math. at 15% savings opportunity on the $250 billion in the United States, that means that companies in the United States are leaving $37.5 billion on the table. Is that right? Essentially?
Your math is right, but unfortunately, you're not going to get all those people as clients.
Yeah, no, I understand that, but the actual savings opportunity in the United States for active bidding is about 37 billion. If that's what
That is
you're
true.
telling me. That's on the low end.
I mean,
That's on the low end, right?
Michael, let me give you a little bit of an example of that. As we've mentioned, the average savings that we find people do is this 14 to 22%. And these are companies that are typically doing some competitive bidding, but our process makes it automated and takes some of the subjectivity out of it to make it, really stick. And as I mentioned, if they're not doing competitive bidding, the numbers get even higher from that standpoint. So sure, there's going to be some of that business that might only save 5 or 10%, but on average, they're going to save an awful lot more than that.
Okay. And for the average company that's below $1 million in cost, and you can drop in right away on your service fees, from the day they meet you to the day they're up and saving money, what's the average amount of time?
We had one client where we got from the agreement that they had to work with us, and they said we wanted to try a few things before we wrote a contract.
Yep.
So they quickly sent us something to bid on, if you will. So
Yep.
From the conversation we had where they said, we want to go forward and try this, they had their first invoice, which showed savings in under 2 weeks.
Yeah. Thank you.
Mike,
And that included that to give them a savings on an invoice meant we had to complete the job within those 2 weeks.
we're working on a large opportunity for a financial services company, and to test out our program, they had us bid a job. The savings on the one job is $118,000.
Yeah, which pays for your service for the year, right?
Pays for our service for 5 years.
Yeah, great. Okay, done.
All right. Well, thank you. Now, if I could, I'd like to invite Sarah and Sandy to turn off your cameras because I want to bring back all of the 5 panelists, and we go through each one to give the appraisal as to of what they've seen and any comments or questions they may have relative to or additional observations they may have. And I'm going to start where I finished. Michael, what are your observations? Oh.
Mute.
You're on mute again, Michael.
I'm on mute again. What is going on? So I was going to say, a lot of people think that print is dead. Print is not dead. I just went to the mailbox last night and got more catalogs than I've ever seen in the last 10 years. I put this in the no-brainer bucket for me, to be completely transparent. If you're under $1 million and you can get somebody to actively manage your bid through a service that has no uplift to your team or your effort, I mean, those are the types of things that CPOs dream of, that you can plug in a service, drop 10 or 15% off of a category of spend and make yourself look special to the chief marketing officer all at the same time, right? I don't know. And the fact that they're willing to run a proof of concept for me and potentially save me, 15 points on an active bid in less than 2 to 3 weeks. I have a very small amount of things that I put into my no-brainer bucket. This is definitely one of them. No question about it.
All right. Thanks, Michael. Kanda.
Well, I hate to say it, but Michael said a lot of what I was going to say, although I'm not so surprised by that. I absolutely agree. I think that the scope and depth of the functionality that you've shown is terrific. The fact that it's offered on a managed services kind of perspective option, as well as the more subscription based, again, that really opens up, I think, both ends of the market to you. I love the proof of concept. I think that's so critical for suppliers, particularly now. And the other thing I would say is that maybe for a future discussion, as I look at the demo, I think there could be applicability outside of traditional marketing and potentially expand into some other categories, which I think could be a really cool thing for you to explore.
All right, Kanda, thank you so much. Hervé, thoughts on this?
No, I was very positively impressed by the tool. I think you're competing against a phone call because I don't know in the US, but here in Europe, you know, I just give a call and I've got the local print company that's going to be stepping by tomorrow. So I think anything that's really helping to deploy the execution to make sure that everybody is on board across the organization is essential. And the possibility to easily bring in some of your some of the local supplier, so nobody feels like, you know, I prefer using the phone because at the end of the day, you know, I'm calling the people I know next door. They'll be here. I'll be safe. So anything that can, you know, help challenge that, like bringing them on board, is really useful.
Thank you, Hervé. Okay, Joseph. Joe, what are your thoughts? What,
Well, I think-
what do you think about what you've seen?
I think our panel has done a great job of assessing the strengths. I don't think anybody really saw any weakness in either the tool or the business model that they have. I would highly recommend this. Encourage someone to try this if they have a a reasonable print requirement. And I think just awareness of this will force people to go back internal to their organizations and look at what do we really spend in print. So again, I think it looks like a great tool, well designed, interfaces, very thorough data. And I think their business model of being willing to let some trials and other ways to test out the tool, I think are very valuable to any supply chain organization.
Thank you, Joe. And finally, last but not least, Cheryl Hayes. Any comments, questions, thoughts on what you've seen today from Sandy and Sarah?
Sure. You know, saving 10, 15, 30, 40% is music to any CPO's ears, right? I mean, that's what we all live for, you know, that's our job. I love that, you know, print definitely is not dying, not with those kind of numbers. I mean, it's in it, and I love how it's evolving, and they've embraced that with, you know, taking into consideration diversity, you know, supplier diversity and environmental factors, offering as a service, you know, right now with the way things are happening, it's important to be able to offer those, that have that flexibility and offer the product as a service. And of course, I love the demo aspect of it as well. So great tool, great job.
Thank you so much, Cheryl. Now, if I could invite the panel to turn off their screens and just invite Sandy and Sarah to turn on theirs. I just want to, on behalf of the panel, Sarah and Sandy, thank you for taking the time to present today. I certainly said at the top of the hour or half hour that I wanted to learn more, and I came away very much satisfied where I gained some additional insight with the helpful input from the panel and your demonstration. So thank you very much for your time.
Thanks so much for having us. We think this is a great concept, not just for us, but for anybody going forward. Thanks again.
Thank you. And to you, of course, the viewing audience, I want to thank you for entering the CPO arena once again. I'll remind you that our next broadcast will be 2 weeks from now, but stay tuned to this broadcast. It'll be released within the next week. Well, you'll be watching it now, so it'll be released for you live. And we will be also releasing a synopsis covering the judge's assessment of what we've seen today. We'd invite you to visit and check out the RSN network and to learn more, reach out either directly or through social media to either Sarah or Sandy. Thank you all once again.